Next, we have a paper titled Catholic Perspective on Transgenders Problems and Possibilities, presented by Rijoy Johnny and Joshua Kishant, third year philosophers of Jnanadeepa. Now, I call upon Joshua Kishant to kindly present the paper.
Good morning, everyone. Catholic Perspectives on Transgenders, Problems and Possibilities. During our last summer vacation, we did a project on synodality. As a part of our project, we interviewed Catholics from different dioceses all over India, all of them laities. One of our inquiries was on the role of trans people in the Catholic Church. To our surprise, 98% of the Catholics were not willing to see a trans-inclusive church. Even the remaining 2% who were willing expressed conditions such as separate chapel or at least a separate timing of worship and restricting leadership roles to only cisgenders. Of course, we interviewed only a handful of people and their views do not represent the views of the Catholic Church. We realized that people are not aware of the official teachings of the Catholic Church on trans people, nor did they understand what a synodal church is. Cardinal Dolan, Archbishop of New York, narrates this incident. Protesters outside St. Patrick's Cathedral, who disagreed with the Catholic Church, yelled at him, "I am gay, why do you hate me?" The cardinal responded, "Nice to meet you. As a matter of fact, I love you. You are God's work of art, the apple of his eye, embraced by God who passionately loves you." We initially thought of naming this presentation Incorporation of Transgenders into the Catholic Church. But then, as we began our research, we realized the Catholic Church never excluded them. They are always part of the Church. The Church does not accept any sort of discriminative practices against trans people. The Church emphasizes treating trans people with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. But due to the lack of an exclusive document that mandates the Catholic Church stand on trans people, it is up to the local ordinary to formulate rules based on the given context. Some bishops have expressed their solidarity with trans people in this initiative, but many adopted models that unjustly excluded trans people. The cause of such diverse ways of looking at the subject lies in the Catholic Church's understanding of being trans. So here we are to represent the philosophical implications of such understanding and unjust practices. Our research points out 5 walls that block the communication between the Church and its people including both trans and cisgenders. Number 1, being trans is not in natural law. Catechism of the Catholic Church 2357 states that being trans is contrary to natural law. But science has a different take on being trans. Dr. E.O. Wilson, the greatest evolutionist ever after Darwin himself, researched being trans. In his work, Unusual Qualities of Personality, he addresses this scenario from an evolution perspective. There is an epigenetic mechanism that operates in a pregnant mother. For example, a queen ant has the ability to give birth to worker ants when the colony is hungry, or to soldier ants when the colony is under threat. In humans, this epigenetic mechanism is automated. the epigenetic mechanism gets triggered according to the needs of the family. Firstly, it is nature-devised birth control because trans people have 80% less chance of getting conceived. For example, for every older sibling one has, the chance of being trans goes up to 33%. Secondly, when the pregnant mother goes through prenatal stress, for example, when the mother's life is in threat, but the baby in the womb happens to be a male, the epigenetic mechanism would make modifications in the genes so that this baby replaces the mother. 37% of transgenders reported that their mothers went through prenatal stress, whereas it is just 3% in cisgenders. Therefore, being trans is totally natural. If not, natural selection would have excluded it long back from the gene pool. Number 2, being trans is not ethical. 2 months back, Archbishop Alec Banda of Lusaka, Zambia, circulated a letter in which he accused the country's president and other government officials of becoming lax in their enforcement of anti-LGBTQIA+ laws. He was referring to the irrational laws formulated during colonization for easy governance. He called for stricter implementation of such heartless laws and intolerance towards LGBTQIA+ community. It seems, according to him and conventional thinking, being trans is unethical. But how can we be so sure that our ethical norms in themselves are holistic and unbiased? Psychologist Carol Gilligan's idea of ethics of care was a novel understanding of ethics compared to the traditional understanding of ethics of justice. Ethics of justice has traditionally been viewed as an ideal in patriarchal cultures because it is championed by men. However, women tend to look at morality through a lens of relationship, compassion, and responsibility to others. The aspect of care, as pointed out by Gilligan, has often been overlooked because of the limited power women have typically held in the public domain. If only we can nuance our ethical norms just by including women in its formulation, just imagine the participation of multiple genders in the process of formulating ethics. Number 3, tolerance towards trans may lead to church decline. On the first week of this month, the Archdiocese of Denver made a gender policy that bans trans students from attending Catholic schools. LGBTQIA+ parents, employees, and even allies should be excluded or fired from Catholic institutions. Most Catholics who do not want an inclusive church argue that the tolerance towards trans people may lead to church decline. But the truth is the contrary. Research done by Pew Research Center shows that 50 years ago, more than 90% Americans considered themselves Christians. By 2020, it came down to 64%, and it is likely to come down to 54% in the next few years. The research also predicts that by 2070, it would be little over 35%. Cardinal Holrich, the Relator General for the Synod, recalls that once he met a 20-year-old girl who told him that she wants to leave the church because of its unwelcoming attitude towards trans people. When the cardinal asked whether she was trans, she replied, "No, I am not, but my closest friend is. I know of her suffering, and I do not intend to be part of those who judge her." If we are not being inclusive, then more and more young people are going to leave the church, thus causing its own decline. Number 4, our policies are unchangeable. In September 2015, the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith did not permit a transgender man in Spain to serve as godfather for a baptism. The church statement concluded that the person did not possess the requisite of leading a life conformed to the faith and to the position of God Father. And there was an objective absence of the necessary requisite to assume the ecclesial responsibility. We could not accommodate change to our policy. Let's see how science works. Aristotle predicted a geocentric model of the universe, but he could not answer how the celestial bodies interacted. It was that one single unanswered question in his theory that brought about Ptolemean and Copernican model. Though these new models too were flawed, they brought us closer to reality. Science accepts a paradigm despite unanswered questions and starts working on it. At a later point in time, these unanswered questions would increase in number and overpower the paradigm. No further inquiry could be made. At that point, scientists would come up with a new paradigm that answers the old unanswered questions, but then this new paradigm comes with its own new set of unanswered questions. If science, which is working with objectively existing material reality, adopts new paradigms and accommodates changes in the face of overpowering unanswered questions, why not our centuries-old policies? Number 5, being trans is not in the form of God. Last month, Archbishop Michael Jackals of Dubuque, Iowa, wrote a letter in which he gave a spiritual explanation for being trans. He explained that our first parents disobeyed God, thus causing the division between body and soul. He went on further to say that one such form of disconnect is between gender and body, that is, being trans. He was referring to the book of Genesis, where we read, "When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, God created them." However, the understanding of philosophy in this regard is a bit different. Philosophy owes a lot to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. There is one major difference between Plato and Aristotle. The world of forms, an abstract idea of Plato, is a faraway, perfect, and ideal world. He demeaned this world as a mere imperfect copy of the world of forms. Aristotle, on the other hand, wanted to make sense of this world. So he proposed the idea of hylomorphism, where the form is not a faraway, unintelligible idea, but existed together with the matter. If God created only males and females in God's image and likeness, how do we account for trans people? Who created them? In whose image and likeness were they created? Let us not be like Plato in conforming ourselves to an abstract, faraway form, but like Aristotle in recognizing the form in one's own given self. Is it only the problem of the West? When we talk about the issue of trans people, it is not uncommon to think that it is the problem of the West. But the truth, that is not true. In the West, trans people have at least some sort of dignified ways of earning a livelihood and access to education. But in India, due to the strong presence of social stigma and exclusion, a vast majority of them end up asking for alms in trains, buses, and traffic signals. Worse still, some are made victims of human trafficking. Many accept their state and sufferings as if that's what they deserve, or that's where they belong. In India, they become invisible, not just to the church, not just to the mainstream society, but even to their own families. Therefore, it is a more pressing issue for the Catholic Church in India than in the West. Having said all that, the Catholic Church is not too intolerant towards trans people. Already, there are some revolutionary things taking place in the church. Tia Pesando, a trans woman, recently made news when she was accepted to the Carmelite Sisters novitiate in Canada. Germany's Franciscan friars elected Brother Marcus Furman as their provincial, who openly came out as gay. Cardinal Holrich, the Relator General for the Synod, said no one is excluded, even the divorced and remarried, even homosexuals, all of them. The kingdom of God is not an exclusive club. It opens its door to everyone, without discrimination. They are not bad apples, they are also fruit of creation. In a world overwhelming with anti-LGBTQIA plus ideas, Sister Tia, Brother Marcus, and Cardinal Holrich are rays of hope. The Catholic Church has pioneered many fields, such as science, education, healthcare, and social action. It is high time that the Catholic Church becomes a model for the whole world by fully incorporating her marginalized members of LGBTQIA+ community, despite all the unanswered questions and endless arguments. Because God created all of us, and of course, God saw that it was good. To conclude, we would like to present two biblical models of the church. First, the ethical boast model, where the Pharisee inside the place of worship was ethically boasting by comparing himself to the tax collector outside. Second, the synodal model, where Christ founded the church among the marginalized, whom the world considered sinners, tax collectors, and prostitutes. But in the eyes of Christ, they were closer to God's heart than the ethically upright. The problem is right before us. We can very well ignore the problem and not talk about the elephant in the room. Or we can also choose to create a church after the model of Christ by being open to exploring possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. Definitely, this paper has shed light on the possibilities involved in constructing an inclusive space for transgenders within the church and the various current models of interacting with transgenders currently operative in the church.